Yeah. Hi guys, I'm James from MegaCat. I was the first cat. I'm very excited to introduce Maximum Apocalypse today. Do you want to go Mike Nade next?
Sure, yeah. I'm Mike Kinade. I'm the designer of the original board game that the video game is based on.
Mr. Ramlock?
I'm Ranlock, or I'm the head of engineering at Megacat Studios.
I am TJ Tag, associate producer on Maximum Apocalypse video game, as well as the visual identity lead.
I'm Madison. I run the focus group testing here at Megacat Studios, and I'm also on the accessibility team.
Who wants to give the top line on what the game is about, what we're looking at, what players are getting into here?
I think on our side, like we've been in indie studios since day zero. A lot of us made a conscious decision to jump into the deep end and work in games we had a love and interest in. And there's so many people in MegaCat that have a rich love for tabletop. And a lot of times we'd find that at trade shows, when they'd lay out tables for us, like things at PAX, they'd always put us near the tabletop folks as well, since we have physical cartridges. And I think the physicality just kind of drew a little bit deeper into us, meeting people like Mike, and then wanting to work on kind of maybe taking the things that we do with gaming and maybe expand some of the signal with some of our indie tabletop friends. So when we first met Mike and we saw Maximum Apocalypse, we're like, man, this is pretty cool. This could look visually interesting and then solve some of the, I think, like sometimes friction that people get getting into some tabletop games that are incredibly intense. And I think there's some players that really like that. And there's some players that probably want something that can really enjoy these quick, snackable gameplay sessions. So that's kind of the really high level of why we wanted to get into this space and kind of what drew it. There's so many tabletop fans on the team. I feel like that's been on the wish list since we kind of started MegaCat.
Yeah, and I would just follow up saying, I would identify myself as a video gamer first, a longtime video gamer. When I was younger, I started in Magic and tabletop and everything, but I lost that when I was in high school and college just because, it's hard to do. It's much easier to jump on the LAN and play Halo when you're in college and stuff like that. And it wasn't until years later that I rediscovered board gaming and my love for it. And in many ways, Maximum Apocalypse was inspired by a lot of the indie video games that I loved playing and knew about. It's essentially my attempt at making a board game that's like a roguelike adventure survival game, like so many of the indie games out there that were popularized sort of in the late 2000, early 2010s, late 2000s.
There's this like shared affinity towards like in some of our company goals and values, like couch co-op and getting together and playing games with each other. That's just like triple emphasized with tabletop. So I think that just felt like a really, really easy play to get the team excited about.
Yeah, 100%. It's why I love tabletop again. Because I remember playing like Mario Kart on Super Nintendo with my friends in 6th grade in a basement. And now you don't do that with video games anymore. Like, it just doesn't happen. But tabletop and board gaming is where you can have that experience again.
And so with this one, like it's a post-apocalypse roguelike, as you mentioned, where you take on one of several different survivors with different specialties and just kind of try to survive as long as you can, whether you do it alone or with others. And I'm curious, like starting out as a board game and then coming to where we have like this video game, how interesting was it to try to like take all the functions and mechanics and aesthetics of the game and turn it into a video game, so to speak?
One of the things that, I'm so happy about as sort of the board game publisher and designer is that so many of the board game implementations that are out there, like that were board games and become video games, are really just like the board game in a virtual space. And one of my favorite things about the Maximum Apocalypse project is that coming from a video game sensibility and knowing video games so well, like that's not what we wanted to do. It's not what I wanted to do, and I don't think it's what the MegaCat team wanted to do. We've kept what the game is, like all the rules are the same, but video games gives us a way to present it a completely different way and sort of capture what you're trying to capture on the tabletop as far as theme goes. But it just isn't possible with cards and components on the table. And I think the team's done a really great job of sort of capturing what a video game version of this is while still maintaining the sort of rules and general sensibilities of how the board game works.
Yeah, and TJ Cat, I know you've been living in this, dude. I'd love some of your favorite moments.
Yeah, like I said, our goal was turning the board game into something that works as a video game, because if we were just to do a one-to-one translation, just like, okay, take these assets, put them digitally. That already exists both in like Tabletopia, like tabletop sim mods, stuff like that. With what we're able to do with the video game version, we're able to have like a little bit of like interaction, like a little bit of visual flair, and make the, you know, have sprites and characters move and interact in a way that gives it a little bit of extra flair there, so that you're relying less on your imagination to bring these characters and world to life. We have it in front of you with sound effects and music. Really good score so far by our music hat Mitch, and, you know, cool sprites that are inspired very much by the artwork from the original game.
And you can't have a really good apocalypse without a ton of really crazy looking VFX. So I'm glad to see that stuff all humming off.
One of the things I noticed right out of the gate with this is like, there's going to be multiplayer in this. There's going to be a form of like multiplayer that makes it similar to what you could do with the board game. And I'm curious, like, is that completely local, or is that something you can do online with others? How is that working?
So we're actually using Steam's own networking solution. So the game is fully multiplayer via the Steam API features. So you invite a friend via the Steam friends list, and from there you just, you know, actually play online. You see them select the character, you do your things, they do theirs, and you can see each other play. And since the game is turn-based, the screen also transitions to the other character, so you can see them playing. And you can also choose which one you're seeing at each time. So if you want to go back to seeing your cards while they are playing, you can also do that.
There's a few reasons we did that too. One of them being that I know it's a constant challenge to find people for matchmaking that want to play the games with you. And even if you have things like hyperactive discords and all these other communities that people come together on, I feel like there's not an easier way with Steam's friends list and being able to open it up quicker, so you can just see who's online and say, hey man, you want to do a couple apocalyptic roguelike runs with me? You know, this is the way.
So this will have options to like, you can either get together with your friends, pull people off your list, or is there a possibility of like joining up with just randos to start a run?
That's a good question. Right now, it requires you to have your Steam's friends list going, but our expectation is that all the things that happen on things like Discords, like in the Rock Manor community and Make Out community, there's already a lot of private playtesting there for that same purpose. But I haven't seen an elegant solution for random, other than people just selecting random, because there's no lobbies. What do you think, Ramlog? What do you think is the most interesting way to solve that?
Yeah, we could do, Steam itself already has a lobby system, although it's not widely used. But we could do that, we could do full random, or we could do communities on Discord or something like that for joining as well.
Yeah, we were looking at some of the, TJ, have you seen the, I guess, Shack TJ, have you seen some of the cool Discord matchmaking stuff they have there too? They have like a new Discord rich presence, it's a matchmaking things. I kind of didn't want to gate it behind one more piece of tech for folks that don't use Discord. Something I've noticed is that there's a lot of folks that are big tabletop fans, that are like casual game fans that love video games, but they definitely don't use Discord and Twitch and things like we all use that are living in gaming all day. I didn't want to make it like another discovery challenge, but it's an interesting problem to solve. Maybe there's a way to have it as a toggle or something.
Oftentimes with board games, like there's so many mechanics involved, so many features involved. Would you say that this is like kind of one-to-one as far as what's in the board game coming to what's in the video game? Or is there things that are gonna like that won't necessarily be in the video game on day one that might come later, or are there plans afterwards for like adding stuff that might not be in there at start?
I guess I'll kick that off. So we have a big appetite for DLCs, and the DLC in Maximum Apocalypse is awesome. All the core gameplay features that are in like the Maximum Apocalypse tabletop game are represented in the digital game, the version we have now. We're actually live on Kickstarter currently too. We have just over maybe 10 days left, something like that. But it's winding down, and we're about to close in on another stretch goal for some of the DLC content too. I can see, based on all the other fandom that Mike Nade has created, and as the father of Maximum Apocalypse, the DLC content definitely gets a lot of fan sentiments. I don't know, Mike, did you create the DLC based on like customers driving what they wanted, or is it just always part of your?
So my goal with like the DLC we revealed so far and sort of where we're headed is I'm trying to keep things in the same chronological order that the board gamers experienced it. So, the video game that's on Kickstarter right now is the original core. Like if you go back to the first Kickstarter of Maximum Apocalypse where it was born, the core set and the original sort of the core game, the original Maximum Apocalypse board game is what we're trying to represent in the current version of the board game. And then the first DLC content is like the first expansion, which I'm pretty confident will unlock that first expansion. which was Kaiju Rising, which has 2 new characters and like a kaiju threat. And then my goal would be to sort of continue down the line of features. So board gamers sort of know where we're going because they've experienced everything. But I think we released things in a good order with the board game, and it kept people interested all the way through. And it's a good path to follow moving forward. It makes the most sense because the final, like as the expansions went on in the board game, talking about complexity and stuff, we tried to keep the original board game a mid-weight style game and didn't want to get too heavy. But the nature of board game expansions is sort of it gets heavier as you go and add more expansions and more components. So from a coding standpoint too, I think it makes sense to not go crazy trying to add all these new features and timings and things to the video game when that doesn't really apply until the last few expansions. So we're going to try to hopefully eventually follow the order and catch up to where the board game series is.
And just to add on a little bit, like as we're focusing on the core game, like if you play Maximum Apocalypse before hopping into the video game, the rules are going to be exactly the same. The card's going to be based on the current edition of the game. They work as they would in the video game or in the board game version. We have it all there. So like if you're familiar with Maximum Apocalypse, hopping to the digital world, it's going to be the same good time, just different medium.
A lot faster too.
Yeah, a lot faster for setup. Yeah.
No prep time, no worrying about whether you forgot to increase hunger. It's just all there.
The Kickstarter topic brings up an interesting conversation. Like, first off, like, can you speak to like how it's been going, and then also, what has the reaction been like? Who's coming along for the ride? Like, are you seeing a lot of the fans of the board game coming along? Are you seeing a lot of new faces come along and see like, what is this? This is interesting. How has the turnout been with that?
I'll start with this because I think I probably have the most experience with Kickstarter, just because kickstarting and board game and crowdfunding in board game is such a huge part of the industry right now. Not as much in video games. So the first thing I'd say is just what was really important to me, sort of knowing Kickstarter and knowing crowdfunding, was, we've been working on this game now. I actually was like looking it up, and our first emails with MegaCat were like back in 2000, like end of 2020, like beginning of 2021. And it's been 3+ years, like working on this game effectively. And we could have done a Kickstarter, a year into that project, a year and a half into that project, and it wouldn't have been the right time. We would have made backers wait an excruciating amount of time while we figured out online multiplayer, like all these particulars. So it's really important to me, if we were going to do crowdfunding, to do it near the tail end of the game where we can get the game in people's hands quickly. And because I know people have been burned by video game Kickstarters, people have been burned by board game Kickstarters too, but video games, I would say, has a worse reputation. It's sort of a different animal. Based on where we are, I would say I definitely feel like, the Rock Manor Games crowd, who are the sort of initial people, I think, are fans of Rock Manor Games and our board games, and they're also video gamers. They're sort of that cross section. I think the overall response from those fans is like really positive. If anything, they're like the ones pushing us they want all the content, right, for their board game. They want to like catch up with everything they have. And they're the ones driving us with like all these particular questions about, variant rules and like things that are like really deep into the board game. And our goal is to get those people beta testing the game, so we think they'll be great beta testers before the video game comes out, because they have so much knowledge about it already. That's where we sort of are. As far as like the video game, market as a whole, like bringing in new people, we've definitely brought in some new people just because we have some pledge levels where people can buy the board game and they're picking up physical copies of the board game and the video game together, which is nice for new people. We definitely have some of the people taking advantage of that. But I'm not sure with like Summer Games Fest and some of the other video game news that's been going on at June, like I think we were eclipsed by that a little bit. I'm not sure how much information we've gotten out into the greater video game world or like Steam players world, but the MegaCat guys know that sector better than I do.
But we have Steam Next Fest coming up with Maximum Apocalypse we part of too for Summerfest. And then it's funny, like we're closing in on like 650 backers with no paid ads, no paid influencer spots. Like the people that are giving us coverage are just like people that always support us and support indies. And we have some really neat stuff coming up this week. But a lot of the opportunities we did get for folks that gave us immediate like pickup, we asked them to kind of place it as we closed the Kickstarter, since we did have it funded in the first day and a half. So I think that big thrush at the end, we were hoping to unlock some of these stretch goals and take some of that momentum that all the existing like MA fans have jumped in and asked about.
which is what always happens too. Like that's, you know, Kickstarter is like about a third of your, I mean, my experience in the board game industry, being a sort of well-known entity at this point, is about a third of your funding comes or more in the first, you know, week, 3 days, and then another half of your funding can come from like the final week, and then the middle just sucks. I mean, it's just like you get as much as you can, you try not to have negative days, and you just hope that the little incremental stuff you're getting on in between helps you for the rocket at the end.
As this game has been coming together, like I guess I'm curious about on the, there's a thing also like about like you want to make this fun as like and respectful to the original board game, but you also want to make it like fun as a video game, and I imagine there must be some level of challenge in there. So I'm wondering, as far as testing goes, like what has been the biggest challenge in like not only making this faithful but also just like fun on its own in every way that you can make it?
Well, I think on the design side, you know, knowing how much to tutorial and automate things, and then how much to, you know, require people to do deep tabletop thinking has been a little bit of a like an interesting hurdle. You know, I think that the general expectation in a lot of video games is you have these quality of life reinterpretations that make things super fun and super low friction, so people can just get in and play. And some of the tabletop games are almost purposely built through progression to become more challenging, require another level of like serious critical thinking and playing. And so maintaining some of that essence in the game while still making it pretty low friction for people to pick up and play, I think it's been a, you know, back and forth since we started the game. I'm a huge fan of roguelikes. It's one of the reasons we love Maximum Apocalypse too. And I think the way we're interpreting it too has a little bit of like Slay the Spire kind of influence. I think that game's so easy to pick up, and that's one of the reasons it was as successful as it was. Because a lot of times it's someone's first roguelike, so making sure that kind of ramp up is there at the beginning of the game, I think is one of the things that's essential for like a video game player. And I don't know if we want to talk about the multiplayer hurdles, but it's a real pain in the cattail doing all the multiplayer stuff as usual.
You have that original design, you have like the visuals to work with from the board game, but like obviously you don't have the sounds and the effects, and you don't have the music to do. So what has it been like sort of fleshing out places where like there wasn't really anything there, and you kind of had to come up with something to match the aesthetics and mechanics of the game itself?
Megacat TJ, is it an HR liability for us to talk about all the firecrackers under your desk and all the post-apocalyptic kind of method training you've been doing to get kind of in scene?
As long as nothing I say is admissible in court, we should be fine talking about it. So yeah, no, it has been as a visual identity lead, coming up with like how can we interpret the visuals and the world of Maximum Apocalypse into the video game form. I'm glad you said about the sounds and the music. Like our sound effects team has been going through like, okay, what sound does a rusty bear trap make? What sound is an alien laser going to sound different from, you know, a robot laser? You know, having fun discussions like that. When we were trying to come up with the original vibe for the music, it was like, okay, Maximum Apocalypse has horror elements, but it's not a horror game. It has adventure and action elements, but when say fully like action adventure, it combines all those. So we were going looking at like what movies get that kind of vibe. So we were thinking stuff along the lines of like John Carpenter soundtracks for like the movie's blanking on me, They Live, which has like spooky elements but has action, you know, stuff like that. You know, get into those atmospheric synthesizer vibes for some of the enemies, and also having more drum heavy stuff for like the mutants, because we were listening to the Mad Max soundtrack for some of them. Visually and audibly, it's been a really fun challenge bringing the board game to the video game atmosphere, and Mike's been giving us a lot of really great feedback and a lot of, you know, creative input so that we can make sure the best version's coming out on the screen.
As we kind of coast into the end of this, I would just like to give you an opportunity to say, where can folks find out more about the game? How can they get more involved with like learning about it, getting together as a community, maybe like setting up to make sure that they got their party ready to go on day one when this comes out?
Well, if you want to follow megacatstudios.com, subscribe to the newsletter. We have all sorts of cool stuff coming up for play testing that Madison's coordinating. If anyone's on the Kickstarter, of course, we're going to be playtesting with those folks as well. You find us on every social platform for Megacat Studios. And Mr. Mike, you want to go through the Rock Manor hype train?
Yeah, I mean, we're similar. RockManorGames.com is where you can find all the board game information. We're on socials too. We have a Discord channel, although I'm sure it pales in comparison to the video game side of things. But we do playtesting for board games over there as well. So if you're into that type of thing, it's there. But we also have Maximum. We have like a channel there for Maximum Apocalypse fans. I'm sure a lot of them will be looking for players online as well. So we'll try to share people across Discord servers so they can get online and play with each other.
And as we close this out, is there anything else you want to share that we didn't hit in any of my questions before we close it down?
Mega Cat's located in Pittsburgh, and I specifically live near Monroeville, which has the Monroeville Mall, which is where the original Dawn of the Dead was filmed. And if you know anybody that's born and raised in Monroeville, it's not hard to find somebody that's been involved in one of the Romero zombie movies. So I'm all about the zombies, the zombie faction.
You're living in it.
Yeah.
I have a good contribution, TJ. Have you ever been to like Mars, PA during the Mars Fest? Like every year, you might find this kind of funny, Shack TJ. So there's this area called Mars that have this really cheap alien statue, and like a pretty small community of people just congregate near it and have like little like mini carnivals every year. Some that dress up as aliens. I think every city should have a place like that. I'm really proud to say we have one here in Mars, PA.